How's it going, everybody? It's Jack. We're back with another video. Today I want to talk about a story going back when I was starting out as a general contractor, and what happened. We ended up being $200,000 in the hole, basically, in losses, and that accumulated over about a 18-month to 24-month, give or take, time period. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that with everyone, because I'm sure that there's other companies out there that face that problem, maybe not to that extreme, or maybe even more, right? So, and it's a scary situation, and you really don't know what to do, what's going on, how you're going to get out of it, and it's overall, it's not a great situation. So we're going to just hop right into kind of the story that led to that. So when I was first starting out, I was fortunate enough to get a job at this country club here. We're based out of Idaho. So it was a golf course, it was a resort, and it was a new up-and-coming one. And they reached out to us to do some remodeling on their facilities. They had a fitness center, and they had a lake club, kind of, a place to hang out and park your boat, eat some food, that kind of stuff, right? Play some games. And being a new company, I was pumped. And when I refer to we, I'm talking, the company, me, the team members, that kind of stuff, right? So, we were excited. We had these big jobs, I think it was probably just under $1 million in sales, right? Maybe 750,000. And they were about probably 8 to 12 month project timeline. And so we were pumped, this was huge. We were brand new, and we got to work and we got started. And they gave us, customer deposit up front. Many of that's pretty standard in the industry. Security deposit, retainage, whatever you want to call, right? It's the leverage we need as a contractor to, have throughout the project. We're putting a lot on the line. So we got security deposits on these projects, and we got to work. Well, as those projects progressed, and this club, was starting out and it needed more work done at their facilities, we were kind of the small contractor that were great for doing these remodels. It's a little glary today. It's very sunny here, but we were the contractor that we fit in perfectly to do these remodels, and we just kept taking on the work. We were pumped, right? So we had the fitness center and the lake club going, and then we got these cottage remodels. So there were these little cottages. I think the total square foot per side was about 700 or so square feet. So we got 12 individual addresses, or 6 duplexes, basically. It was a duplex, so there were 6 duplex buildings we got. And we did some light remodels on those. And then there was 4 townhome additions that we were able to do with them as well. It was an existing structure, kind of like it was probably a 1,300 square foot single story townhouse, and there was 25 feet or so of space, and then there a vacant space outside that people were using for yard space, and then they had a detached garage, and they wanted to bring those 2 structures together with kind of an addition. So we took on all this work. So at this point, although not a ton of sales for when you're talking construction, but for us at the new time, we had about probably $2 million of sales from this one developer, this one company, and we were ecstatic about it. But this is where things started to take a turn, and I didn't even realize it, right? You don't even know the disaster you've gotten yourself into until it's kind of too late. So we get all this work, and I'm just hiring people. I hire an office person, I hire a superintendent, we have a delivery driver to do dump runs and tools, and it's just chaos in that sense. And then at one point we had I think I had 13, 14 carpenters on payroll doing all this work because we do a lot of in-house work. So we have carpenters, right? So we have quite a bit of employees for a company who's only been in business now for, maybe a year or just under a year. And the payroll expense was insane. And ultimately, what ended up happening is that we had hundreds of thousands of dollars in deposits from all these jobs, in addition to we didn't really quite know how to bill properly, invoice properly, and we ended up, not intentionally, but we ended up billing in advance a little bit. And so we got ahead of the money. And the company that we were working for, the developer, they were a big company, right? But they were also new and they were also disorganized. So they were allowing the payments to get made in advance. So it was just a disastrous situation. And at one point, I remember sitting with an account balance of $680,000 in our account. And I remember looking at that, just thinking like, oh my gosh, I have so much money. I've made it. That was so easy. I've got almost $750,000 sitting in my account, right? And when you see that, you think a lot of things. You think that you have more money than you actually are entitled to. Long story short, we continue doing the work, and as these projects start to close out and all these bills start coming in and we're getting towards the end of the job, that $600,000 or so starts to slowly disappear. And I've got payroll. I'm running a huge payroll every month, and I've got overhead expenses and all this crazy stuff, right? And as all these jobs came to the end, it was like this noose around my neck, around the company's neck of, the financial neck. It just got tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And on the end of these jobs, I realized that I have basically spent money that I was not entitled to on things such as overhead and payroll for all these employees. And the employees weren't doing, they could have been better, but we didn't have systems in place and so on, right? But we basically spent money that wasn't ours because we're looking at this account balance. And at the end of the job, there's deposits that need to be returned. There's subs that need to get paid. There's employees that need to get paid. And the money is running out faster than you could even imagine. And when it all got, closed, said and done, we were roughly about probably $200,000 in the hole that we owed people. We always paid our employees. We always made that a priority, because if you don't pay your employees, you get into legal issues. And if you don't pay your subs and your vendors, you also get into legal issues. But you're going to get into legal issues much quicker with your employees than you are your subs and vendors. But we were about $200,000 in the hole, and I remember there was probably 30 or so vendors that in some way, shape, or form needed payment from my company. And I didn't have the money. I didn't even have nearly close to the amount of money. I had maybe $5,000 in the account, right? We were broke. And the fact that we were a new company, we didn't have our sales system lined up, so we were lacking work. We had some jobs that we were trying to get going, but just it takes a long time to get these jobs going. So ultimately, I had to go and I had to cut my company down, because the employees that were on salary, which at the time there was 3 of them, those alone were costing me probably $20-something thousand a month, and it just wasn't working, and we had very little work, right? And I had to go do something very hard, and I had to go cut these people. I cut all 3 of them in a matter of a 2-3 day period, and it was brutal. And I had to get rid of carpenters and cut my expenses on every single front. And when I look back at that time, we'll make another video on kind of how we got out of the hole and what happened there and all that stuff. But in this video, when I look back at that, I realize that it goes back to mega growth with no systems. And if you go and you get a ton of work and you have no systems in place to manage that work, you're way better off just not taking on the jobs, because massive expansion can bankrupt a company arguably faster than no work. So you really need to be considering the jobs you take on, the size of the jobs, the amount of volume, and the systems you have in place need to be able to take on that work. Because you don't want to get into a situation like I did, and I was very fortunate to get out of it, but it was brutal. I mean, it took almost 2 years to get out of it, and it was not fun. It was not fun at all, and I don't think most people would ever even want to go through half of what we went through to get out of that. So it really goes back to systems. If you're going to take on big jobs, you need to have good systems in place, and you need to be able to delegate tasks to people so that it doesn't all fall onto you and you become the bottleneck. So that's that. If you like these videos, you find this content informative and helpful, hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, like it. You know, I want to hear from you guys. What do you face? You know, what are your problems that you're facing out there in the field? What's your trade? And what are you trying to figure out? What are you currently struggling with? It's a hard world out there, being a contractor. I love it. I think we all love it. I think that's why we put up with the crap that comes with it. But we all need to stick together, you know? So let's hear what you got. I'll see you on the next video.